My siblings are technically half-siblings through our mom, but we're very close and we never use half with each other. They live with their dad since our mom died 18 months ago. Right now, they're 13 years old, female, and 15 years old, male. I'm 24 years old, male. My mom was divorced from my siblings' dad long before she died. Their dad remarried several years ago, and he has 2 more kids who are younger than 7 or 8 years old. Those 2 kids are the half-siblings in question. I say they're my siblings' half-siblings because my siblings use half, and they are not close to them like they are with me. I know this from my siblings. Their dad hates it. It bothers him most of all that they just call me their brother while they always used half with his kids. Now that my siblings are a bit more independent, they come to my house more, and their dad doesn't like it. He has tried to stop them, but they fought against him, and in the end, he relented because I guess he didn't want to alienate them further. Their half-siblings have asked questions about where they go, can they come, etc. My siblings spent the weekend with me. Their dad called me up the day before and said his other kids wanted to come and asked if I would have them Friday afternoon, and he would pick them up at 8 p.m. that day. He said since my siblings are so close to me, he thinks it would be better if I started to include his other kids. I told him I wasn't going to have his other kids over. He asked why, and I told him I'm not his babysitter. He told me I never see having my siblings as babysitting, and I said it's because they're my siblings, and I want to spend time with them. He told me it would bring everyone together if I accepted his other kids, and letting them come to my house on occasion would be a nice start. He offered me $50 for the trouble. I still said no. He decided to bring his other kids when he dropped my siblings off, and he asked again where his other kids could hear. I said no again, and his youngest started crying. He called my sister on Saturday to speak to me. He then tore me a new one for making his daughter cry and not allowing his kids into my home. He said it wasn't like they were spending the whole weekend, just a few hours where they could be with my siblings, and maybe we'd all bond and everyone would be better for it. He said clearly I'm too much of a jerk for that, but that one day I'll have to answer to his younger kids about why I alienated my siblings from them. I told him it's not my fault my siblings aren't close to his kids, and he said I'm old enough to help, but refused even in front of the kids. He called me a petty jerk. Am I the jerk? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. I have a feeling if he stopped pushing this agenda, your siblings wouldn't get upset. Was his daughter crying because he told her she could come to your house, making her expect she could come in? Can you speak to his wife about this? What he is doing is cruel, and if he calls you to yell again, just tell him you're sorry he feels that way, and hang up. There is no point in talking to him. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Your former stepfather sure is a jerk, though. It's all on him that his daughter cried and was upset. He clearly thought you would cave so not to upset the child, which is manipulative as hell. You put it best when you said that you are not his babysitter. Your siblings' relationship with your ex-stepfather's other kids is not your responsibility. Now, for the update. I recently posted about some family issues I'm having with my dad regarding my older half-siblings. Most of the people who commented on my last post were super supportive, and I appreciate that a lot. It's been a week since the events of my last post, and things are still super awkward with my dad. On Saturday, my older half-siblings came over. They showed up with snacks from their favorite store, which made me realize that I had never mentioned in my last post that they were basically the only 2 people in my life who can actually get me to go to that store. It's not that I dislike it, but every time I go there, I end up spending way too much money. They know this too, which is probably why they showed up with stuff for a movie night. I'm not sure how long it's been since we just sat on the couch and had a movie night, but it really felt like a while. We just sat in the living room, sharing funny stories about our mom. They didn't know this, but I had been feeling kind of down about her recently. I guess I just really missed her. So when they came over and we started talking about her, I felt pretty good. At one point, I asked them how their week at school was, which is when they told me about a project they were working on. It's kind of silly, but I was really proud of them for being responsible enough to plan that out. I guess they could tell I was proud because they started telling me about all the other stuff they were doing in school. Then they mentioned how their dad had been asking them to come over more often, which was a little weird because they just started coming over to see me more often. Then they told me how uncomfortable they felt when their dad insisted on including the younger kids in our get-togethers. I told them I was sorry about that, but that it was really up to their dad because I had already made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with the younger kids. Their dad ended up calling while the three of us were just hanging out, and I answered because I wasn't sure if it was important. I could hear the annoyance in his voice as he asked how things were going. I told him it was good, and he asked if I was free for a family dinner next weekend. I said sure, thinking maybe it would help ease the situation a bit. That week, my siblings texted me to say they felt pressured by their dad, which was kind of a bummer. They told me he kept pushing them to bond with the younger kids, which I wasn't too happy about. They were posting about their dad and the younger kids a lot on social media, which made me think they didn't really mind spending time with them. I didn't say this to my siblings, but they had to have known he was their dad, too, when they decided to post about him. Anyway, I decided to invite them over for a movie night to distract them a bit. They picked this classic comedy, which I won't name because people would probably judge me for having never seen it. We ended up laughing the whole night, which was nice. I was hoping it would keep their minds off of their dad, at least for a little while. On social media, we started noticing the younger kids asking about my siblings. They were posting this stuff all over social media, and I thought it was kind of weird. One day, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw the younger kids posting pictures with their dad at a local amusement park. My siblings saw the posts too, and they started talking about how they felt. They looked kind of upset about it, which I totally understood. I mean, I get that it's hard for them to see their dad with the younger kids, but they really aren't that different from them. They aren't adults yet, so I'm not going to judge them too harshly for not realizing that. They had been spending a lot of time with their dad and the younger kids, which was probably why they felt so uncomfortable when he kept pushing them to spend more time with them. I thought this might be a good opportunity to get their minds off things, so I suggested that they talk to their dad directly. They agreed, and we finished our drinks before I dropped them off at home. So, we had the family dinner, which was pretty awkward. The dad brought up the younger kids again, saying that he thought it was important for family unity. I tried to steer the conversation away from that topic, but he brought it up again. One of my siblings burst out, saying they wanted to keep things as they were, and their dad got visibly upset. He said they needed to accept the new family structure, and I could tell he was getting mad. I tried to defend my siblings, but the younger kids overheard the argument from the other room and started crying. My dad stormed out of the room, frustrated, and slammed the door behind him. After dinner, he told my siblings that they needed to be more understanding. They left the table feeling frustrated, and I could tell they were upset. Later that week, the younger kids came to my door uninvited. I wasn't sure what to do at first, but I ended up letting them in for a few minutes. We played a quick game, but the atmosphere was super awkward. They asked me why their older siblings didn't spend time with them, and I explained that it was complicated. I told them I cared about them, and they left looking confused, but somewhat satisfied. After they left, I found a message from my dad asking for a family meeting. At the meeting, he said he was considering moving to a new house, and my siblings reacted strongly. They said they didn't want to leave their current home. I suggested we should all focus on being a family, regardless of who lived where. To answer a few questions, my half-siblings and I have always been close. Their late mother was my father's first wife. His remarriage was difficult for them, especially since they lost their mom so soon after. They are adjusting to the new family dynamics, but still struggle with their father's new marriage. They often visit me to escape the tension at home. The invitation to the family dinner felt like a way to resolve the situation, but it didn't help. The younger kids' visit surprised me, but I wanted to ease the tension. I hope we can all move forward together. Am I the idiot for refusing to cook for my lazy brother and recovering father while being the only one working? I am a female over 18 and live with my dad and brother, who is also over 18. Recently, I deleted Uber Eats. I was spending way too much money for the convenience of it. After I deleted the app, I began cooking at home like I used to, making eggs, oatmeal, sandwiches, macaroni and cheese, and so on. After cooking, I would clean up after myself. Whatever dishes I had used, I would wash, dry, and put away. My dad and brother have a habit of asking me to cook, whatever I'm making, for them whenever I start cooking, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The problem starts because I'm the only one actively working. My brother quit his job because he was overwhelmed. My dad tore a muscle in his shoulder at work and had surgery to fix it. My dad is better and isn't in a sling anymore. He started therapy. My brother is lazy and doesn't want to work. Every time they ask me to cook for them, and if I decide to do it, I end up cleaning up by myself anyway. Neither of them offers to do it or help. My dad recently has been having me clean the house, sweep, mop, vacuum, take out the garbage, and pull the cans to the curb. He's also had me start cutting the grass and pulling weeds outside, on top of my full-time job, since my brother refuses to do anything other than get high and play video games in his room. In short, I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing pretty much everything around the house, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the yard, by myself. My dad just sits in his recliner and watches television. Now I understand taking care of everything when his arm was severely injured, but my brother can help and just refuses to. Lately, I've started refusing to cook for them. They started calling me a brat and a spoiled child, since you're cooking anyway. However, I do know that it's still cheaper for me to live with my dad. If I move out and buy a house or move into an apartment, I will be doing everything anyway. I've been overwhelmed for a while. When I ask them to help out, I get told to do it myself or figure it out. Am I a bad person for not cooking for them? Am I actually being difficult? To add, dear God, this blew up. Okay, so I'll answer some repeated questions and I'll try to read everyone's comments and reply where I can. My parents are divorced. My mom and stepdad live in another state. My mom and I have a bad relationship. She is also hurtful. I pay for the groceries. My dad has social anxiety and hates going to the store by himself. My brother just doesn't shop. He still uses Uber Eats. I'm currently looking at apartments, and I'm not going to let my dad and brother know for my own safety. I've tried negotiating splitting up the chores and cooking. They do take turns for a few days. Then it goes back to me, doing everything. I agree completely that it's misogynistic and that the situation isn't great. I didn't realize how hurtful it was getting until everyone started saying that it was. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the jerk. There is a difference between doing everything for 3 people and just taking care of yourself. At the trajectory you're on, you're going to burn out. So as Redditors everywhere say, don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Pull out your calculator, work out a budget, and move out. Comment 2. Not the jerk. Stop doing all the things. Tell them that you can't maintain everything and you need help. If they don't think anything needs to change, really consider moving. An apartment or condo alone will be less work because you won't have a yard or 2 other adults to cook for. Now for the update. 2 days after the last post, I decided to ignore my dad and brother's demands for meals. Like, I'm done being their personal chef. I focused on my plans to look for apartments, but kept it to myself to avoid conflict. I knew if I said anything, they'd try to manipulate me and make me feel guilty, so I just kept my mouth shut. My brother, noticing the lack of food, complained to my dad about my cooking. Like, really, dude? You can make a sandwich. My dad called me into the living room, demanding to know why I wasn't cooking for them. I was like, seriously? You don't know? I explained my busy schedule, mentioning work and the chores I was already doing. I thought that would at least get them to back off, but nope. My brother chimed in, saying he shouldn't have to cook since he was overwhelmed. He is literally playing video games all day and smoking Zaza. This turned into a shouting match where my dad accused me of being selfish. I just couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to leave the house for a walk. I needed a break from the confrontation. During my walk, I bumped into a neighbor who casually mentioned a job opening at a local bakery. I got so excited about this opportunity and immediately thought it could help me get out of this situation. That evening, my brother threw a party in our shared living space without asking. The place was chaotic, loud music blaring, laughter ringing out. My dad was asleep in his room, probably because he was high out of his mind. I returned home, annoyed by the noise and the mess left behind. When I confronted my brother about the party, he just laughed it off, saying I could clean it up. Of course, because he's done so much cleaning around here. The next day, I went to the bakery to ask about the job. The owner was super nice and explained they were hiring, and the hours were flexible, which was exactly what I needed to work around my current job. I submitted my application right then and there. Later that week, my dad mentioned we should all have a family dinner to clear the air. Yeah, right. During dinner, my brother made a joke about my cooking, and my dad laughed. I just rolled my eyes so hard. I served store-bought pizza, playing it off as a new recipe. My dad complained about my cooking skills, and I was just like, whatever. After dinner, I told my dad I would no longer do all the chores without help. He dismissed my comments, saying I was overreacting and being dramatic. It's called having boundaries. The next day, I got a call from the bakery offering me the job. I was so relieved. That weekend, I started packing my things little by little when my family wasn't around. I knew they'd have something to say if they saw me packing. My dad noticed boxes in my room and asked about them, but I just deflected and said I was organizing. A few days later, I learned my brother had invited his friends over again without telling me. Seriously, how hard is it to just let me know? The house was a mess when I got home, so I decided to confront my brother directly about the lack of respect for my space. He laughed it off, saying I should just deal with it since I was always home. Yeah, because I have to be. That night, I texted my dad about needing to talk and set a time for the next evening. I knew this conversation was going to be a big one. When we sat down, I revealed I had accepted the bakery job. My dad was furious, claiming I was abandoning them when they needed me. I announced my plans to move out within the month, saying it was time for me to take control of my life. The tension escalated, with my dad and brother arguing about who would do the chores. In a moment of defiance, I told them they could figure it out without me. A few days later, I officially moved out, leaving a note behind explaining my decision. Edit. The reaction from my dad and brother when they found the note was not surprising. They were angry and hurt, but I knew they'd get over it. I got a lot of support from my friends and neighbors during the move. My neighbor helped with the heavy lifting, and a friend offered me a place to crash until I settled in. Am I the idiot for refusing to let my dad and his entourage take over our new apartment? My husband and I recently got married in January 2024 and are waiting to move into our own 3-bedroom apartment that is still going through renovations that are taking longer than expected. My husband moved into my dad's 1-bedroom apartment after we got married, as no one else has been living there except for me. I have also been paying rent ever since I started working. For context, my dad has been living in a rented semi-detached house with my stepmother and her mother ever since he remarried 7 years ago. They currently also have a male tenant living with them in the house who is rarely home due to his working hours. Also, Dad's mother-in-law owns a studio apartment that is currently vacant. A few months ago, my dad came to us and told us that the owners of their rental house want it back to undergo renovations and then rent it at a higher value, which my parents clearly cannot afford. While my husband and I were house hunting, we brought it up to my dad and offered to let them stay with us at no cost. He declined, as he said my stepmother would not feel comfortable living with another man in close proximity. My husband, it's too far from her siblings and the city center, and she is used to living in landed properties, so an apartment would be too small for her. We also offered to move out of his house so that they could move in, but he declined as there is only 1 bedroom, and her mother insists on following my stepmother wherever she goes, even though she has her own home. Yesterday, my dad sat me and my husband down to let us know that he will be moving in with us to our new home as time is running out for them and that they'll move out after 4 months once the renovation is done. However, my dad told us that it will be him, my stepmother, her mother, and their tenant, and they will be paying us rent. I was confused as it's a 3-bedroom apartment, and where would we have space for the tenant? And he continued saying that my husband and I can continue living in his 1-bedroom apartment while they live in our new home for the next 4 months. That made me angry, as all along, they have decided not to live with us, but somehow made the decision about where we will be living. I had to maintain my composure as I was with family and didn't want to ruin the day. Once we were home, my husband and I sat down and talked about what we were going to let my dad know if he were to ever bring the conversation up again, and have decided that they can live with us and still not kick us out. Or they can live elsewhere, since they actually have choices instead of choosing the easy way out. To add, corrected an error. Dad only owns a 1-bedroom apartment. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the a-hole. That's ridiculous. Laugh out loud. Your dad cannot expect to seize your new apartment that you haven't even had the chance to live in while forcing you to live somewhere else. If it was just your dad and stepmom, maybe you should let them. But why would you have to yield your new home to your stepmom, who is not your real grandmother, and, worst of all, some random stranger tenant of his to move into your new home? I personally would not agree to this arrangement if I were in your position. By the way, you said your stepmom would not feel comfortable having to live with another guy, your husband, at close proximity, but she is okay to have a male tenant living at her current house? Comment 2. Not the a-hole. He doesn't get to make executive decisions for your property. That's entirely inappropriate, and he's trying to steamroll you when I guarantee he knows what he's doing isn't acceptable. I honestly think at this point, there would be a lot of tension if you let him move in at all. I think it would be better if you made him find somewhere else to stay. The mother-in-law has a studio. He has a 1-bedroom apartment. Maybe the tenant can rent the studio for a bit, and your dad and stepmom can move into his apartment with the mother-in-law set up in the living room until they find something better. Now for the update. 3 days after the last chat, I got this text from my dad asking to meet up at a coffee shop near our apartment. Like, what now? Fine. So, we met up there, and he showed up with my stepmom and her mom. Awkward vibe, to say the least. My dad then says they started looking for a new place, but haven't found anything. Of course, they haven't. My stepmom chimes in about how they didn't want to impose, but also didn't want to end up homeless. Well, it's a bit late for that, but okay. My husband showed up shortly after, and let's just say things got a bit tense. He wasn't thrilled about the whole sharing our space thing, and I can't blame him. My dad kept insisting they could all fit into our 3-bedroom apartment, even though it was going to be cramped. Yeah, real cozy. My stepmom then says how close they'd all be as a family during this time of need. I mean, that's sweet and all, but not at the expense of our sanity. After a long discussion, my dad mentioned they could pay a small rent. My husband was like, "That's not the point, dude. It's really not." Later that week, my dad calls saying they found a temporary arrangement with a friend's basement apartment. Great. So, we agreed to that. Over the weekend, we had a family barbecue at my dad's place, and let me tell you, the tension was thick. The stepmom brought up how they could all share responsibilities when they moved in, like cooking and cleaning. My husband straight up said no. We should not be expected to take on extra burdens. My dad suggested a trial period for living together, which only made my husband more frustrated. Like, how many trials do we need? As the barbecue went on, I overheard my stepmom talking about how she wanted to renovate the basement apartment. I lost it and had to confront my dad about their plans. It turned into a heated discussion about boundaries and respect. My stepmom jumped in saying they were only trying to help. Help? Really? My husband then directly asked her what their intentions were behind moving in. She got all defensive and stormed inside, leaving my dad visibly upset. After that, he mentioned he was considering moving in with his tenant. Like, what? A few days later, at a family dinner, The tension was off the charts. My husband bluntly said we weren't going to support them financially or with space anymore. My dad left the dinner abruptly, and things turned sour. My stepmom followed him out, and I could feel the anger radiating off my husband. He suggested we needed to focus on our life together and set clear boundaries moving forward. Good plan, honestly. Then, a few days later, I saw my dad at the grocery store, and we exchanged cold words about the situation. Not even worth getting into. By the end of the week, he sent a text saying he found a new place, which was a relief but also felt like a loss. I don't know, mixed feelings. Edit. I didn't mention that my dad's family was living in a 3-bedroom apartment with just the two of them. The stepmother's mother stayed with them for a few months, but they didn't have a tenant then. They could have also stayed with her mother in her large house. The tension has affected my relationship with my dad, and I'm giving it some time. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.